Hola, everybody. Um, Today, I take each of these topics on every week. And today is what is the real world? And it has been profoundly helpful sitting with this one this past week. And I take it back to levels of mind. The real world that our egos call the real world is the perceptual world. It's that outer layer of the levels of mind. And the ego calls that the real world. And if you think about it, I know when I was doing neurology, there was an interesting statistic that was thrown about. And in neurology, and this was a while ago. This is maybe 40 years ago when I was in school. But at that time, they were saying, we understand about 10% of the brain. And these are the educated, eggheads that are teaching us neurology. We know 10%. The other 90, we're trying to still figure out. Well, it applies to the real world too. So we have this idea of what the real world is. It's the world we're living, the world that sometimes appears happy and sometimes doesn't, the world that we're living in. When in reality, none of that is the real world. Absolutely none of that is the real world. So we've got a good 100% to correct until we can see the real world. And the real world is, I don't know if any of you read the book, The Disappearance of the Universe. But the real world is when the universe disappears. That's the real world. It's the world where forgiveness is not necessary. It is the world that once we have forgiven everything, the real world starts appearing. And and let me I'll just read, because Jesus says it so much better than I do. Okay. What is the real world? The real world is a symbol, like the rest of what perception offers. So that outer layer of the levels of mind, perception, is just a symbol. It as the real world, but we're perceiving it through error. Okay? So everything that we're living in is a symbol. The real world is a symbol too. But once we start seeing through the eyes of love, the symbols are peaceful. So what may have triggered us initially? Oh, okay, I'll use one of mine that maybe some of you can relate to. The symbol of my father, who I loved, my birth father, appeared as an alcoholic. I had a lot of forgiveness to do because I didn't see it as peaceful. In fact, there was no peace. When I'd look at my father, there was just no peace, because I had huge judgments about who he was, how he should have been, what I wanted to feel when I was around him. All those are just perceptions. And then we slap them on this world, and I'll call this the ego world versus the real world. The ego world is just full of my ideas of how a perfect world should look. And there is very little that when I first started the mind training that I would have said looks perfect. And so this is when you start really asking yourself, what is the real world? The real world is the world that Holy Spirit, remember last week or whenever we were talking about Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit is us. It is that part of our minds that remembers we come from a loving thought in the mind of God. Before we got caught up in trying to change everything. And then as soon as we started changing everything, oh man, we created the ego world, which is the world you look at now. I mean, it's the world where governments don't work. It's the world where there are wars. There's a world. I mean, it's an ego-driven world. And so what we're attempting to do with mind training is get back to the real world, the world given us by God. And the Holy Spirit lives in that world. And that's where we have to keep asking for our forgiven mind for help. This is not asking the ego for help. The ego for help with a father that was alcoholic is make him stop drinking. Then he'll love me more. Okay. And I had to forgive all my ideas about who fathers are, who alcoholics are, who anybody is that I still see as needing to be different. Okay. Okay, the real world is a symbol like the rest of what perception offers. Yet, and we're talking about the real world now, not the ego-driven. The real world stands for what is opposite to what you made. So what we made was an ego-driven world. The real world is opposite to what we made. Really let that sink in. That's kind of major because it's everything. Your world, and we're talking about the ego world, is seen through eyes of fear and brings the witnesses of terror to your mind. I was talking to someone last week. Oh, and I was talking about, wanting to murder everybody. Well, I say that anytime I think I want to correct someone. If I want to correct them, I'm going to murder them. And because I don't know how to correct with love, I really only know how to correct through killing you off. And she was saying, well, I wouldn't use the word murder. And I said, well, what would you call it? Well, she says, and she thought about it. Well, I guess it is murder. And I said, well, say it in a way that gets your attention. And when I say I murdered them off, I'm paying attention. I don't use that idly. And Jesus, I should look, how many times does Jesus use the word murder? A lot, I think, and terror and all those really horrible words that, it's like, wow. Well, and I was thinking while I was reading it, first few times, oh, well, it isn't really that bad. But it is, if I'm seeing something wrong, I've got to kill something off in order to make it okay in my mind. Okay, back to the reading. The real world cannot be perceived. This is the real world, the Holy Spirit world. The real world cannot be perceived except through eyes forgiveness blesses. So they see a world where terror is impossible and witnesses to fear cannot be found. Remember, this is a training in mind training. And if we still are seeing things as not perfect, the alcoholic father that beats his child. If I didn't finally forgive that, it would keep me from seeing the real world that the Holy Spirit wants me to see. And this is big. I don't take this lightly. This is a miracle. This is a miracle that I can see an alcoholic father who's abusing his son as perfect. Because if I don't see it as perfect, I have forgiveness to do. I have a lot of forgiveness to do. So the real world, the world of love, cannot be perceived except through eyes forgiveness blesses, so they see a world where terror is impossible and witnesses to fear cannot be found. The real world, the Holy Spirit world, holds a counterpart for each unhappy thought reflected in your world, a sure correction for the sights of fear and sounds of battle which your world contains. So if I'm still living in the world where I'm forgiving, I need to keep going, keep going, keep going. Allow things to surface. Don't hold yourself responsible for them, but just see that only through a correction, through love, can we really get to the true ecstasy that awaits us. And that ecstasy is this real world, Holy Spirit world. The real world shows a world seen differently, through quiet eyes and with a mind at peace. And that's the mind training. The mind training is trying to get us to a place of peace. And that's why while you're doing the mind training, I want you to acknowledge when you do feel peace. Acknowledge it. Thinking back, when I first started, I'd have just mere moments where I'd be feeling peaceful. And just acknowledge it's like, that's what I want to see ongoingly with everything. Okay. And in this Holy Spirit real world, nothing but rest is there. This is the rest we're looking for. So if you feel a moment of peace, rest, rest. Because there'll be another thought that jumps into your mind that's going to get you rattled again. And then you'll have to do this whole process with that thought. And it's not wrong. It's the reason we're here. I don't know if any of you have read the Urantia book. I don't recommend it because it's very, very wordy, but I did it when I was moved to read it and guided. And it talks about why we're here. And for whatever reason, we wanted to take this challenge on of forgiveness. And there's not a person on this planet that didn't come here willingly to see how to think and live fearlessly and in a forgiven state. And the only way back is to get quiet and constantly challenge yourself with every single thought. In the Holy Spirit real world, there are no cries of pain and sorrow heard, for nothing there remains outside of forgiveness. And sights are gentle. Only happy sights and sounds can reach the mind that has forgiven itself. I want you to take the power of this one in. I'm going to read it again. Only happy sights and sounds can reach the mind that has forgiven itself. Because every single projection, and again, I'll talk about, one of my greatest forgiveness opportunities was my father, birth father. And the reality was when I start doing the forgiveness work, oh, it was so clear with him too, so very clear. I was my father. I was my father. The only difference was I didn't drink. But by judging him, I was the alcoholic. And so I had to go very, very deep into forgiveness because everything you're forgiving is for you. There is no others to forgive because all that lives in our minds, and I don't see my birth father this way anymore, but at one time I could not think of him without complaint in my mind. He was wrong. He shouldn't have been beating my brother. He was wrong. He would leave us when he would drink. I had all these thoughts of who he was, but they were all thoughts where I had to forgive myself because I was just projecting him. And what I wanted was a body that loved me. I wanted my body to love me, but I couldn't do that. So it was so much easier to throw it out there and make him wrong because he was my perfect projection. I was my father. And so by making him wrong, I was beating myself up. And that's where the ego's world gets nasty. And we don't see the true cost of it because we just believe that what we're seeing out here, this horizontal existence with problems and situations and conditions and people and all of that, we see it as something other than what we're projecting. We project all of it. You know, how can we find peace in the world? Change our minds that anything but peace exists. And the only way I know to do that is to go through the mind training. And that's why I find this so powerful. And is it the same person I was talking to this last week? She was saying, well, I'm not digging this. I'm not liking this. And I said, I know. Because we have to accept responsibility for our thoughts. And if we're making someone wrong, you know, the image I have is I'm just punching myself in the face. Every time I have a thought of, oh, they're so wrong. Oh, they're not being nice. There is no one else. I'm thinking it. That's it. So we want to get to the point where we have done, and again, this is not, you know, if you're actively doing mind training, you know, even with the speed up, you know, you're looking at a few years. And that's if you're actively doing mind training. Now, if you're not doing mind training, you may not get there. And that's okay too. This is all an experiment. That's Urantia talks about that too. All these other universes are watching us going, fascinating experiment they're doing on Earth. Fascinating experiment. And they're cheering for us. They want us to succeed. You know? And we've got to want to succeed as well. And that's where watching our thoughts, that's all there is to do. This is not like any other course you've ever done. And this is from someone that's been in school a lot. Nope, can't learn it that way. This is through your mind. And so you've got to catch those thoughts as they come up. And they're fast. Some of them are real fast. But you're going to get better at catching them. I mean, I feel like I really have got the gold medal in watching my thoughts. And I can catch a negative thought before it becomes two thoughts. That's what I say. I don't get one thought away from God. So if I have one thought that comes through that's not helpful, I stop immediately with whatever I'm doing. And okay, we're going to check this out. I just caught one this past week, and it was with someone that I had an issue with a while back, and then I had no contact with him. And then he showed back up in my life. And what was there? My negative thoughts about him immediately. I thought, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back into my life and allow me to go deeper into this work, because this is no longer helpful to have anyone that I have any critical thoughts about. That's not helpful. That's what keeps this world of critical thinking alive. It's my mind. And I take ownership of it. So I've gone deeper with him and really looking at what is it that triggers me? What's triggering me? Now he's arrogant. Oh, okay, good. Oh, this is a great place to start. Where are you feeling arrogance? Where are you still exhibiting arrogance? Well, I do in the thought that I'm better than he is. It's, oh, right. Yeah, I guess that's a little arrogant. And that's how it goes on and on and on. And it doesn't take a vacation, and I know I've had people emailing me, they're going on vacation. I'm going, well, do the mind training. Just because you're going on vacation doesn't mean you can't do your mind training, because guess what? Your mind is right there. And you will have thoughts that come up that need correction through Holy Spirit to see them through love. So this is kind of accepting that there is nothing to do but mind training is probably one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. Okay. Okay. What need has such a mind for thoughts of death, attack, and murder? What can it perceive surrounding it but safety, love, and joy? What is there it would choose to be condemned, and what is there that it would judge against? The world it sees arises from a mind, and that's if you're not in your Christ mind, the world it sees arises as turbulence, as chaos, as war, as people doing icky things to other people. But in the world, if we're thinking as Holy Spirit, and again, Holy Spirit is not something outside of us. Holy Spirit is just that no matter how small it may start out to be, it's that part of our mind that is still as God thinks. And so what we're trying to do is really support its growth while correcting this other way that we've been seeing things for way too long. Jesus says at some point, we're way too tolerant of our thinking, way too tolerant. And this is the mind training. It's like, nope, we need to be catching every single thought that comes through. So when we access the real world, the Holy Spirit world, the world it sees arises from a mind at peace within itself. No danger lurks in anything it sees, for it is kind, and only kindness does it look upon. Oh, this is so powerful. I mean, this is really explaining the two different ways that we think. And we have gotten sloppy. We came in sloppy. And then we had parents that usually didn't really understand these concepts. And so they trained us how to think. My parents, it was clear they were just trying to protect themselves at every step of the way. So I learned how to think like that. And that they're not wrong. It's just that's the way everyone comes in thinking. So it takes a conscious enough mind to know that it wants to think differently and willing to go through the work that's involved to do that, that we can change this so that no danger lurks in anything it sees, for it is kind, and only kindness does it look upon. The real world, the Holy Spirit world, is the symbol that the dream of sin and guilt is over and God's Son no longer sleeps. Now, this is where we can awaken while in this dream. And that's the best we can hope for, is awakening while we're in this dream. His waking eyes perceive the sure reflection of his Father's love, the certain promise that he is redeemed. The real world signifies the end of time, for its perception makes time purposeless. Remember, time is only needed while we're still getting our lessons. So when we awaken while in this dream with the mind training, there's time for everything. We don't ever have to worry about time again. The Holy Spirit has no need of time when it has served his purpose. Now, again, remember, Holy Spirit mind, ego mind, it's in our minds. Two ways of thinking, through love or through fear. And as we train ourselves to think through love more and more and more, then this mind gets bigger and bigger. And there will be maybe one or two little blips, as opposed when you start the mind training, God, I want to murder everybody. Okay? So this is the gift that we're giving ourselves to wake up. And it's not a gift that you can get help with, really. I mean, I know we have this Zoom every week, but really, the only one that can do this is you. Because I had to do it for me. Okay? Now he awaits, but they're talking about our Christ mind. So when we get to the point where we're just using our Christ mind, we're seeing everything as love, love, love. We wait but that one instant more for God to take his final step. And time has disappeared, taking perception with it as it goes, and leaving nothing but the truth to be instead. Oh no, but leaving but the truth to be itself. Ooh, let me read that one again. Now we, our Holy Spirit selves, wait but that one instant more for God to take his final step. And time has disappeared, taking perception with it as it goes, and leaving but the truth to be itself. So we just basically merge with the truth, because that's who we are. But we forgot it with our sloppy thinking and making everything wrong and having an opinion about everything and wanting to correct everything. That instant is our goal, for it contains the memory of God. And as we look upon a world forgiven, it is he who calls to us and comes to take us home, reminding us of our identity, which our forgiveness has restored to us. I mean, that has a very happy ending. He just described death in that last paragraph. I'm going to read this again. And this is what Jesus is saying is death. The Holy Spirit has no need of time when it has served its purpose. Now the Holy Spirit waits but for that one instant more for God to take his final step. And time has disappeared, taking perception with it as it goes, and leaving but the truth to be itself. That instant is our goal, for it contains the memory of God. And as we look upon a world forgiven, it is he who calls to us and comes to take us home, reminding us of our identity, which our forgiveness has restored to us. I don't think I've ever heard death described in such a beautiful way. And yet, how do we revere death on earth? Oh, grief and sadness and tears and, oh my God, it's horrible. They passed away. No, we return to sanity and eternity and a forgiven world, a forgiven mind. But you can't get there without clearing it. So there's no easy way out of this. And I'm saying this for me. the queen of suicides, suicidal attempts. I wanted out. And yet the reality is there is no way out but through our stinking thinking. That's it. You got to go through it. Got to go through it. There's no easy way out of this. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to say goodbye to all our YouTube friends. Goodbye, YouTube friends. And let me stop the recording.